And we've got a big, transition here into Street Fighter 6. They're really setting themselves up for an enticing story, and we've never expected a ton before, but I'm starting to expect a lot now. John, what do you think we should be expecting for Street Fighter 6's story?
All right, yeah, that's I want to get into where the franchise is likely headed. It's not a lock, but as you mentioned earlier, I actually did 10 hours of freaking lore research for Street Fighter, and my brain is probably damaged from doing that. But regardless, I did it for the people, and we are likely headed for a split timeline in Street Fighter 6 where either Rose or multiple other characters travel back in time with her to the early Alpha days or whatever various periods in history come up that Capcom wants to highlight to deal with the threat of G. G is kind of like the big overarching character here. Rose claims it's too late to stop his plans, whatever they may be, and so she's got to travel back to fix it, right?
He's going to turn
We
the
also
entire planet into a giant dance party because he's going to broadcast his theme everywhere. That's what's going to happen.
There we go. Well, can I sign up for that?
You're
Because that kind
welcome.
of sounds
You're
awesome.
welcome, Capcom. Take that. I'll just take a small credit in the credits. You can put me towards the end.
Yeah, that's pretty good. But so we also need to march towards Street Fighter 3, where Chun-Li and others have destroyed Shadaloo, and there's no real mention of Bison at that point. All right, and the rest of the gang, like in terms of the Illuminati, that is Gil and Urian's organization, they have taken over. So like all this kind of stuff needs to come to pass because we know that Street Fighter 3 is at the end of the timeline right now. This is assuming Street Fighter 6 kind of picks up here, which seems very likely because G is the boss character of Street Fighter 5. And while it's possible that Luke's inclusion into the game will really shine some light on what G is as a boss character, Rose and Oro story modes have definitely set him up as more of a threat. And I don't think they're going to be able to resolve that with a single character's, story mode. I think G is going to be the main boss going into Street Fighter 6, and that makes sense, right? G has some ties to Q and Third Strike, but it's really unknown at this time if G or Q is more powerful than the other. We kind of don't know what happened to G, only that he's just not there in Third Strike pretty much at all. At least maybe he's Q and's got the mask on, but where's the beard? Where's all this other kind of stuff?
I have a little theory that I just came up with. It's that G gets his ass kicked and like really bad to the point where he has to like Darth Vader wear that mask or something, or like something happens to him where he has to really reel it back and become like secretive, or just because he's like so burned or something. Doesn't Q have injuries and such? Like you can see on
It's
his
possible, yeah. I
scarring.
mean, well, he does a really deep breathing too whenever he beats you, like he's pretty beat up.
He's
So
basically
yeah.
Darth Vader. So I think G goes through some kind of like a Darth Vadery transition and really gets messed up or sacrifices something so that, like gives of himself and ends up as Q because of that.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that Ryu knocks him into a pit of lava after he says, "You were the chosen one," and G goes, "No," and that
Is that
would
the
be
Darth
perfect.
Vader that comes to your mind when I bring up Darth Vader? That's so sad.
Yeah. Well, John, no one's ever really gone. That's
Dude, can we just forget? We're not going to talk about the not prequels. Those are the prequels. I don't want to. There's only three Star Wars movies. Okay, going on.
yeah. So G is heavily tied to the Earth. He wants to save the people of the planet, but Rose fears this is somehow going to bring about the destruction of the world, right? G might be a puppet of some sort, but he doesn't appear to have direct ties to the Illuminati, Gil and Urian's organization at this time. And I want to say at this time. We don't know how he's tied in there. Both G and the Illuminati seem to want to have like kind of the same goal of like uniting the Earth or doing something like that, but they have very different ways of going about that. It's kind of it's kind of like the classic Capcom of like the bad guys aren't super distinctive, right? Like they're kind of going for these similar goals and like how they get there and all that kind of stuff. But even Gil doesn't actually seem to know fully who G is. But he's felt G's power before, which is something that has been said by numerous other characters as well. G's power seems to be new and old at the same time. And if that sounds like an oxymoron, welcome to Street Fighter Five's or Street Fighter franchise's plot.
Mhm.
Yeah. John, I can hear you recoiling and like just
Yes.
yeah. Go ahead. No,
So,
feel free.
some imagery here. It's kind of biblical. Obviously, when you have Gil in there, he's the Messiah. He looks kind of Jesus-like and whatnot. And so he has the title of Messiah. G sounds a heck of a lot like Antichrist. For those that aren't familiar with like, Revelation and such, he's supposed to unite all of the nations before something like the apocalypse kind of comes around. I mean, how many stories sample from that? I think that that's kind of I see G as kind of an antichrist figure that starts very charismatic, unites all the nations, and then shows his true self or something like that. But I can't like not point out the parallels there.
Yeah, no, it's perfect because it's also Star Wars too. So as you said, how many stories do this? And it's like, yeah, here we go. So it's said that the world is going to end as if a gigantic glacier fell into the ocean. That's something that one of the characters remarks about with G. But for what it's worth, in one of Gil's endings, it has him parting the sea or maybe an ocean, and it leads to a large group of people going to an island, basically crossing the parted sea to Gil's new utopia, right? So maybe that's just a coincidence in terms of like both characters having very significant stuff to do with like an ocean type stuff. But maybe it's also that these two characters' endings are plot threads are going to tie into each other, and they're going to resolve each other, but maybe in a way that you didn't anticipate, maybe in a way that's not been built up before. So it's very interesting. There's obviously a lot of overlap between Gil and G, but they also have their own kind of distinctive plot lines that's going right now.
So he's Moses, Antichrist, Q president
Yes.
in that
And
order.
Capcom should definitely not run into any issues putting major religious imagery and other stuff into their games. Should be totally fine. Gil, as you mentioned, is a Messiah type figure, also an angel type figure.
Yeah,
He's very
seraphic wings,
angelic.
seraphim. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but Oro seems to imply that G's power doesn't come from a physical form, yet a force of will, kind of thing. The Earth, Gaia, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of history in here. If you look up Gaia, it's basically, the power of the Earth, power of, the people united
She's the
together.
Titan of like the Titan of what Earth or whatever. I'm butchering that, but in Greek mythology, right? Gaia.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different interpretations of Gaia and what it is and stuff. And Capcom is pretty liberal with how they're kind of applying all this kind of stuff. So it's if you look at the history of this stuff and the terms and all that, Capcom does tend to borrow, like they take 20% of each term that's out there, and then they make that kind of their basis there.
Hmm.
So getting into it, the main characters, Ryu, Guile, Chun-Li, Rose, they're likely going to be on Team Good Guys again and trying to stop G from doing whatever he's trying to do. Bison is likely going to be relegated to a reduced role along with Shadaloo, because even though he's got the forms of Falk, Ed, Seth, Abel, and maybe other bodies he's influenced, Shadaloo gets destroyed by Chun-Li at some point. Like Chun-Li takes down Shadaloo. Like that is a canon fact in Street Fighter 3, and Bison's been killed like 7,000 times now. We've really encouraged Capcom, and I think other people have, like, okay, we've seen Bison be the main bad guy long enough. Let's try something new. Well, with where the plot is headed, Bison is probably going to be a presence because he's just too big of a character not to be included in things. But it's he's going to be present. Like no one ever really, dies or whatever. No one's ever really
Well,
gone.
and if
But
you have two timelines like that, you can sample from like the modern and the present of like the Street Fighter 3 sort of transition that they're going into, and then Alpha Days. It's like if this is what they're doing, they've opened the door for tons of characters and cross timelines and all this kind of stuff. So it's yeah.
yeah, so the real power of psycho power or whatever crap is it's actually the plot of Street Fighter 5. I know the plot of Street Fighter 5 is pretty much incoherent unless you really go back over and study it, but Bison launches all the satellites, the black moons and stuff, and then the chess pieces basically control those moons. I think there's like 7 or 8 of them, and the whole point of those moons is just to sow chaos, because chaos and corruption feed psycho power. Right, like, so just being chaotic and being crazy makes Bison more powerful somehow or whatever, because Street Fighter. So anyway, Bison is also known for mind control and other bodies and stuff. So he's probably going to have a presence that's fairly decent in Street Fighter 6, but I don't think he's going to be the main antagonist if they do it right. If they do it how we kind of hope they do, because we've just been there and done that way too many times, and I'm hoping Capcom kind of sees this as well. And G is actually really cool. G is a very cool character, so there we go. And this assumes again that Street Fighter 6 is going to take place after 5, and kind of like set things up that way. But it also has to put in place the Illuminati being a real legitimate threat, which we've seen, of course, from Gil and Urian being in Street Fighter 5. Like, there's a thread that Capcom has to follow, and if they don't follow it, it's going to really derail everything. So it's kind of like Star Wars, where you knew that Vader had to do X, Y, and Z to become, what we saw later on. So since Third Strike is probably the end of the timeline for the foreseeable future, you've got to set up your pieces in that way.
Sure.
So.
Sure.
Yeah, so Gil is going to create a utopia on Earth, very powerful fighters and people in general, and the tournament for Street Fighter 3 is specifically set up for that. He invites people, Shang Tsung style, and like, hey, come fight my tournament. Oh, you're really awesome. Let me recruit you, or have Colleen recruit you, like she tried to recruit Jury, actually. Bison and Jury fight, and I forget if like Jury loses her eye or Bison takes it or whatever, and Colleen's like, hey, come join the Illuminati. We're way cooler than, the Shadaloo stuff. And Jury just kind of bolts and stuff out of there, but that's Colleen's main job, is recruiting people, right?
Is that where she rides her forerunner or her four-wheeler over the ocean and ends up in Brazil? Sorry.
Maybe. So anyway, so Urian is also trying to kill or overthrow Gil at some point in time, take over sole control of the Illuminati, and become a dictator, because we need another dictator in there, because we haven't had one for so long. But I don't believe that Urian is ever successful at that, because Gil's quite a bit more powerful than him. So anyway, a number of key players will likely have the following things set up if they appear in Street Fighter 6. Sagat will probably be battling the Satsui no Hado, the Darkado, as when Ryu defeated Necalli, he apparently overcame his own Satsui no Hado, but I'm like expecting it. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Like, Ryu kind of hangs back in Street Fighter 5's plotline, because Kin's like, hey, you don't want the Darkado, like, taking over at the wrong time when you're trying to beat Bison. So Ryu kind of hangs back in the background at first, and then he comes and joins everyone else at the very end to beat Bison, right? And so it's possible that, Ryu doesn't battle the Darkado anymore, but if he does, Ryu and Sagat could actually be battling it together, and former enemies working together to overcome something just like in Rocky 3. Actually could be kind of cool. Sagat's like a reformed bad guy. He was in Shadaloo, in Street Fighter 2, but he dropped out of the organization, and so now he's trying to be a good guy. It would actually be kind of cool to see Sagat and Ryu working together, and to kind of overcome the Darkado.
Dude. Okay, so Evil Ryu was in Alpha, but not canonically, right? In fact, Kage is the first time we've got an Evil Ryu that's actually canonical.
I don't even think he's canon, because he's just he's a what if version of, like, if Ryu chose the dark side, that's what Kage, Evil Ryu, and stuff would be. I don't think he's officially canon, because I don't think that ever happens. But he would be, if that happened, that's what he would be.
I thought it, okay, fair enough, because I thought it was something like if Ryu, well, he would have synthesized the two together and found balance, not like split them apart and then like one comes off of him. So I was just thinking it would be cool if Kage/Evil Ryu were there, and maybe he goes back with Ryu and Chun and company to the Alpha days, and that's why you see Evil Ryu in those. And like, if they're dealing with all this, what if they could do something similar with Sagat and have like a shadow of Sagat come out and do Evil Sagat? Maybe cool awesomeness. I think that there's a lot there.
You'd have to do like Angry Sagat or something like that. Like they like to do different names for it, because I think it's like Violent Kin and Ultra
Frustrated
Street Fighter 2.
Sagat.
Yeah, that's I mean, again, the Shoto moveset's so popular. Why not do something like that? Like, have the spin-off versions, and especially when you put the Darkado in there. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of fun stuff they can do.
Tired from a long day, Sagat just wants to put his feet up, and his wife's nagging him. Sagat, that top tier, guaranteed.
Nice. So, joking aside, but good stuff there, because that's sometimes what happens in these games.
Doesn't have to be canon.
Yeah, Street Fighter is voiced by some of the best voice actors in video games. Laura Bailey is Chun-Li. She was in The Last of Us and got nominated for like a bunch of awards and stuff for that. She's an extremely good voice actress. Her husband is Guile, Travis Willingham, who's really good. Liam O'Brien is Gil. Kyle Aber is Ryu. And they're usually all overseen by Taliesin Jaff, who actually does Blanca's voice, and I think he does Adon's as well. But he's extremely good at organizing voice actors and getting them a really good performance out of them. So the talent is there. If they're going to really up the level of quality for the the plot, which is what they've talked about doing. They spoke extensively in Street Fighter 5 where they're like, look, we're not going to match NRS this time around. There's just no way we can do it. Shout outs to Chess Pieces and Moons and other crap like that. Like the lack of coherency in Street Fighter 5, the story mode is legendary. It is some of the most like that's what took me so long studying for this. It's like, what the hell actually happened here? And I'm like, really combing over it. No one's going to do that. You actually have to tell a cohesive story that's just not completely random in your game, and that's where people are going to follow it, right? So if they do that, not only could they write something really good, they have the talented voice actors to bring that to life, to really make that a thing. And it's like, it's not like Capcom, has really crappy voice actors. Like across the board, they have extremely good, talented people. And if they can figure out how to do this, like Street Fighter's plot could be really incredible. Like, because again, just seeing all these iconic moments, having a great performance from they could do some great stuff. So I'm pretty hyped up about the potential of it. I don't want to say like I'm hyped up about it like overall. Like there's potential here for this to be awesome. The reality, if you say I believe it when I see it, that's probably a pretty fair estimate on Capcom's history. So
I'm gonna ask you, do you feel like it was a missed opportunity that they didn't tie the whole theme of Moons and like Armika together? Maybe they had originally for the story, but then they had that whole censorship with Mika's butt and Cammy's butt and such, and like, we got to get rid of this whole thread. We don't even have anything to do for Mika. Like, just make her a big Zangief fan and that's it. Maybe she had a much more, what would you say, a lot more gravity, a lot more pull on the story originally. But I do feel like it's at least a missed opportunity.
it's speaking real quick on this too of Necalli. He was such a cool character, and like even watching the story mode again, his visuals are incredible, and what they could have done with that and what they should have done with that, and just completely dropped the ball with it. And I actually think, unfortunately, that Necalli is one of the reasons how come Street Fighter V's plotline is so incoherent, because they had such a big basis for the character. He was going to be incredible. He was going to have so much going on, and they ran out of time and were not able to capitalize on the story they wanted to. And so the story probably had massive rewrites at the very end of the thing, and they just kind of had to piece some stuff together and make it work. And that's not a recipe for success. You have to take your time. We know with NRS, they have a whole division of people that work not exclusively on the story mode, but like heavily, like there are individuals who do nothing but that, and they plan it out way in advance, and they work so hard on it. And so I will tip my cap to Capcom. At least they admitted that with Street Fighter V when it was in development. People were asking, hey, are we going to get an NRS level story mode? And they're like, no, that's not happening here.
We're not
but
that
they
good,
have said,
guys.
they were honest, right? So I'm praising them for being legitimate.
Yes.
But they did say that the next game, people should have heavily raised expectations for it. And I'm like, hey, okay, so let's see where they get to, but the foundation's there. John, I could see from your face that you have the utmost faith that is definitely going to happen, and they're going to deliver on every promise that is. Yeah. So anyway, so there it is.
Trust them just like I trust politicians.